This afternoon, I will be talking to you for a short while about voice services. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lucy Temple in the Sunflower Centre, who is going to be talking about signs of domestic abuse and how to ask the question around domestic abuse. I'm going to share my screen now. If somebody could just come off mute and let me know that you can see it.
All good, Leanne, I can see it.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Suzanne. So, Voice for Victims and Witnesses is a free and confidential service that provides support to victims of witnesses of crime in Northamptonshire. We are funded by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner and Ministry of Justice grant funding, and was set up as a limited company back in 2019. We have 4 services, and I will talk you through today a little bit about what our services do, what we've achieved in the past year, and how you can refer into our services. You'll see on your screen now, we have 4 logos. The first purple logo reflects our adult service. The orange logo reflects our children and young people service. We also have a road harm service and a restorative justice service. As part of our offering for support, we include the County's Witness Care Unit. This is a unit that updates all victims and witnesses that are involved in any cases that are going through the criminal justice system. So this unit will provide updates as to any charges, any court hearing outcomes, if people are required to go to trial, if people are sentenced. They will be the people that provide all of that information to anybody travelling through the criminal justice system. In addition, Voice supply 3 levels of support to our adult victims of crime within the county. The first level of support is immediate support. We are joint data controllers with Northamptonshire Police, and they share data every morning around victims that have reported crimes within the preceding 24 hours. On behalf of Northamptonshire Police, we contact those victims to let them know that there is potentially free and confidential support available to them if they feel that they are struggling to cope since the commissioning of the crime that they have reported. For our adult clients, when we make that contact, we can provide immediate support. That may be somebody that we contact. They say that they are struggling to deal with that crime. They would like some conversation around it. They talk about their thoughts and feelings. They want us to recognise that they've been a victim of crime. But at the end of that initial contact, when we ask if there's anything further we can do, they may say, no, thank you, that's all I needed. I just needed my feelings validated. I needed to know that someone has heard me. I needed to know that someone knows what's happened to me. Thank you very much. That's all the support I need. The second level of support we can supply is practical support. This could be assisting victims with completing criminal injuries compensation forms. It could be supplying somebody who's been assaulted with a free personal attack alarm. It could be supplying an elderly victim of burglary who didn't hear someone sneak in a back door and nick her handbag with a door wedge alarm, or window shock alarms if people are suffering from antisocial behaviour. It could be something practical like assisting somebody to contact relevant housing authorities if they required. Our third level of support is our ongoing emotional support. For adult clients, we provide in-house ongoing emotional support with a team of specialist support workers who are both paid and volunteer workers for Voice. This entails regular ongoing emotional support. So somebody who is allocated to a specific service user who they can contact on a regular basis, maybe weekly, fortnightly, daily if required, to talk through their thoughts and feelings around the crime that occurred and the impact that's having on them. They will be taught coping mechanisms, how to improve their health and well-being, how to cope better with everyday life following what's happened. And that support can go on for as long as that person requires it for. For our children and young people, we additionally offer specialist support in the form of trauma therapy or counselling for those who are required. So following appropriate risk and needs assessments, if there is specialist support required, we can access a number of sessions through our service provider, the Child Psychology Service, who provide that on behalf of Voice for Victims and Witnesses. In addition, we have a restorative justice service that allows victims of crime to have safe contact with the perpetrator of that crime to ensure that the perpetrator can try and restore some of the damage caused for the crime or the harm that they've caused to that person. And our final service is our road harm service. This service offers the same levels of support, but also includes specialist support around trauma therapy and bereavement counselling for anybody within Northamptonshire who may have been affected by a serious road traffic collision. This may be a collision that involved a bereavement or a serious life-changing injury. And we will support anybody who has been affected in that collision, including passers-by who may have seen the collision, including people who may have stopped to administer first aid, including those involved in the collisions themselves. So who don't we support and who do we support? We can support anybody so long as they are aged over 6 years of age. The person who is trying to receive support must be resident within the county boundaries of Northamptonshire. They must have been a victim of crime, persistent antisocial behaviour, or of a serious or life-changing fire incident or road traffic collision. It doesn't matter where the crime occurred or how long ago the crime occurred. It could have been 5 minutes ago, it could have been 5 years ago, it could have been 50 years ago. We will support people who are witnesses to crimes and going through the court system. It doesn't matter for the majority of our clients whether they have reported their case to the police or not. There are some exceptions for that, of course, for young people around safeguarding issues. And as I said, there is no time limit on that support. We exclude those under the age of 6 years. We exclude those who are not resident within Northamptonshire, with the exception of our colleagues in the National Health Service who work in Northamptonshire hospitals. We exclude certain crime types. Homicide support is provided by a national support provider. Rape is provided by our contracted provider is for service at Serenity that I will talk to you about shortly. And we don't support those who are institutionalised in Her Majesty's prisons. So what did we do last year? And to give you an idea of the volume of people that are being referred through, we received over 46,500 referrals into our service last year. That was just over 15% more referrals than we received in the preceding year. The adult service alone received just short of 42,000 referrals. Our children and young people service, about 4,500 referrals, and our road harm service, just over 200 referrals. Just short of 11,000 of those referrals coming in were in relation to domestic related offending. Just over 1,000 in relation to hate crime related crimes. Just over 1,200 referrals related to sexual offences, whether they be historic or recent. Over 8,000 referrals relating to violent crimes and over 9,000 in relation to theft, fraud or burglary crimes. So what happens when we get the referral through? We will try to contact the person who has been referred as quickly as we can. We are contracted by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner to do so in a timely manner. So for a victim who is referred to us who is entitled to enhanced support under the Victims Code of Practice, we will attempt initial contact within 48 hours. Last year, we were able to achieve that against 92% of victims that were entitled to an enhanced support service. For all other victims of crime, we endeavour to try and contact within 72 hours of receipt of referral. We did that within 98% of referrals received into our service. In addition, we had a number of referrals that came to us for people who lived outside of the area but had suffered crime within Northamptonshire. We helped almost 2,000 people reach out to local victim support services in their area of residence. And during that year, over just short of 2,300 people referrals received accepted support with our service, whether that be immediate support, practical support, ongoing emotional support in-house, or for our specialist support services as described earlier. We provided nearly 3,000 support sessions. That's almost 1,900 hours of emotional support that was provided free and confidentially. 91% of those that accepted support with Voice for Victims and Witnesses said that they were either satisfied or extremely satisfied with the service that they received. And of the adult cohort who were referred to us, 82.4% who had regular ongoing support sessions with us said that they felt better able to cope with everyday life following the support that we had provided. In addition, we provided more than 200 hours of counselling and trauma therapy to young people who were referred to our service. As I said, that counselling and therapy is provided by our contract service provider, the Child Psychology Service. And of those children and young people, all of those who completed that counselling and therapy came away saying that they felt better able to cope, they felt safer, and they felt that their well-being had improved. Of the clients that came to us for our road harm service, 100% of those completing support with Assist Trauma Care who provide our trauma therapy and bereavement counselling said that following that support, they were better able to cope with everyday life. In addition to the services that we host as voice services, we also manage the contract for the county's IDVA and MARAC administration service provision, the Sunflower Centre. And in addition to that, we manage the contact for the county's ISVA, Independent Sexual Violence Advisory Service, that is based at NHFT provision in Serenity. You will be hearing shortly from Lucy Temple, who will talk you through some of the ways of asking questions around domestic abuse. The Sunflower Centre, as I said, is the county's independent domestic violence advisory service and MARAC administration service. They provide crisis response support to the highest risk victims of domestic abuse within the county of Northamptonshire. That will be immediate crisis support, including helping assisting with access to refuge, safety planning, risk assessing, and looking at long-term future safety. The Sunflower Centre received over 3,111 referrals into their service for genuine high-risk domestic abuse victims last year. In turn, there were 1,618 referrals made to Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, MARAC, where partner agencies sit around a table and ensure the safeguarding of those high-risk victims. We saw last year an increase on child on parent abuse referral volumes. 42% of those people that were referred over to the Sunflower Centre were given advice, signposting, or engaged in regular support with an IDVA. 53% of the referrals we received related to domestic offending by an ex-partner, an increase of over 10% that we saw in the previous year. As with all voice services, the Sunflower Centre aimed to contact victims within a timely fashion as well. They aim to contact 95% of victims within 24 hours of receiving a referral and did so in 91% of cases last year. Our colleagues at Serenity support victims of serious sexual assault and rape crimes. They received over 350 referrals last year, despite it being lockdown year. They provide independent sexual violence advisory services in the same way that IDVAs do and in the same way that voice service colleagues do. They provide ongoing, regular emotional support for people to talk about the impact of what's happened to them, their thoughts and feelings, and to support them through any criminal justice process. So why do we do what we do? I'll leave this screen here just for a couple of seconds so you can have a look at some of the comments that the service users made last year following receiving support through our services. So how can you refer in? As I say, we act as data controllers for Northamptonshire Police. So any victim that reports a crime to Northamptonshire Police will be referred over to us automatically, and we will try those contact attempts within 48 or 72 hours. For people who want to self-refer in, they can do that via our website. Very quick and easy smart form. They can click refer themselves in, enter a few essential details. That referral will come through to us, and again, we will contact within those timelines. If you're a professional wanting to refer somebody into our services for assessment, you may also do that through our website, or you can email us if you prefer to do so. I would ask, though, that if you are referring clients or service users in, you will be required to gain their consent to share their information with us for the purposes of that referral. Our opening hours are Monday, Wednesday and Friday, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. We stay open a bit later on a Tuesday and Thursday till 8 p.m. and we're open Saturdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'll hand you over now to my colleague Lucy Temple from the Sunflower Centre.
Thanks, Leanne. Can you hear me now? Am I off mute?
We can hear you.
Brilliant. Okay. As Leanne said, my name's Lucy. I am one of the IDVAs, Independent Domestic Violence Advisors, based at the Sunflower Centre. And again, like Leanne has already mentioned, we deal with the high and very high risk victims of domestic abuse. Now, I can speak forever and a day about domestic abuse, but we don't have that much time. So we're going to go back to the beginning, really, and just focus on how important it is to ask that initial question. I think sometimes we get caught up in the details around what happens to our clients or what happens to people that you work with once that referral has come into our service. But actually, it's so important to get that information in the beginning. It's crucial to ask the right questions and to react to those questions and those answers in the right way, really. So I think in the very beginning, we're just going to go back and go over how to ask the question and what to do. So domestic abuse can take many different forms. Oh, it's gone. Thanks, Leanne. Leanne's controlling my slides, so it's a double effort here. Domestic abuse can take many different forms, and people living with it will experience it in many different ways. There is no set blueprint on what a domestically abusive relationship is. So we need to try and look beyond the physical signs and the physical injuries, the signs that we're probably a bit more aware of, and be more professionally curious in order to identify the people who might need our help and support but don't necessarily make it that obvious. Some people, as you know, will be quite open and will tell you what they're going through and tell you that they're being abused. But more often than not, we might be working with people who try to tell us that story in a more subtle and in a more hidden way. They might try and give us a few more clues rather than completely disclosing straight away. People living with abuse might give us signs in the language they use. For example, they might say something like, I don't really feel that safe right now, or yeah, I could fill that form out, or I could come to that appointment, but I don't feel too safe at home, or my partner doesn't like me having friends, or doesn't like me going to the shops on my own. My family member controls things I do. Is that normal? Or my family member is always putting me down. So the next slide looks at other things that we might see or hear. So other things that might happen that give us a few more clues that somebody's experiencing domestic abuse. We might witness some sort of abusive behaviour, or somebody being aggressive towards their partner or family member, or belittling them in front of us, bullying them, or saying humiliating things. We might notice that maybe a patient or a client that we are working with seems fearful of the person that they're with, or the person that they're with won't leave them alone. So if you're trying to get somebody on their own to ask them questions, it's impossible. You might see that the person that you're dealing with, that client or that patient, is always checking in before they're speaking with the person that they're with to make sure that what they're saying is acceptable. And you might also notice that there are physical signs. There might be bruising or scratching or injuries that, in that professional curiosity, that feeling in your gut, you think maybe isn't quite right. So I need to just dig a bit deeper and find out a bit more about that. This is a slide that we use in a lot of training when we talk about asking the question, because it really highlights how important that seemingly simple thing of just asking somebody, how important that can be and how much of a difference it can make to somebody's life at that minute when you do ask it. I'll read it out just because it's being recorded and so that I know that everybody's heard it, but you have to excuse my I'm not the best sort of CBeebies bedtime story presenter. So it's based on an extract from a book that Roddy Doyle wrote called The Woman Who Walked Into Doors, and its main character is a woman called Paula, and she is being abused by her husband and is regularly attending hospital. So she says, sometimes I'd think that I could escape if I could get behind the right curtain, if I was asked the right questions. Ask me. Charlo was always beside me, always near, but if I got the right doctor or nurse, I'd be safe. They'd see and they'd take me away. They'd take me through a door and I'd be gone before Charlo knew it. I'd have the kids out of the house before we got home. We'd be gone without ever having to look at him again. They'd help, they'd do it for me. There was a room up at the hospital where we could stay, a place where he could never find us, with huge windows and a balcony. The right curtain, I just had to be in the right place in the queue. Open sesame. I'd be led behind the curtain and it would be over. I'd be mended and safe. We'd be happy and safe. I'd get worked up waiting. I believed it was just a matter of luck, maybe this time. A nurse would look at me and know. A doctor would look past his nose. He'd ask the question. He'd ask the right question. And I'd answer it. And it would be over. Charlo was always with me. He was always there. Behind the curtain was the only time I was alone. His shadow on the curtain. A few minutes, one question, I'd answer. I'd tell them everything if they asked. Ask me. I'd have told them everything. I swear to God I would have if they'd asked. I'd have whispered it if they'd asked first. He pulled my arm behind my back and lifted me off the floor. It would have been easy after that, watching them listen. He hit me. He kicked me there. He burned me here. He did it. He did it. Save me. I'd have told them everything. I just had to be brought behind the curtain, asked the right question. It's really quite hard hitting, I think. And don't get me wrong, you'll ask the question and sometimes you'll get a really negative response or you won't get a disclosure at all. But I think it really shows there just the importance of trying and of asking that question. And if we can get the foundation right and ask the question, then the service and the support that we offer further down the line will be much more beneficial. So this slide is developed by CARDA, which is the Coordinated Action Against Domestic Abuse. And they looked at how to help other professionals begin to ask the question, because it can be quite daunting if you don't know how to ask, what to ask, and even more daunting sometimes for professionals when we've done training before, is that they're not sure what to do with those disclosures, once they get them. So this has been developed. It's called the 5 R's of inquiry. And it's quite, I think it's quite a visually really sound checklist to go through so that you can use it yourself if you do get a disclosure, or if you have somebody that you want to dig a bit deeper, or you're a bit more curious as to what's actually going on. So the first part of the 5 R's of inquiry, the first one is recognise and ask. So we've talked a bit about recognising it and potentially what sort of signs we might see other than the physical injury signs, the other sort of subtler signs that we might be witnessing on a day-to-day basis. So the next part of it is asking. And it's quite tricky sometimes, asking the right question. A lot of the time when we talk to other professionals, they find it quite helpful to have a list of questions or to have already looked at questions, because some people have different styles. Some people's roles mean that they have to inquire about different things with the people they work with. Some people like to ask in a direct way, or some people feel more comfortable, or the setting that they work in means that they can ask in a more indirect way. So the next slide does show some of the, just a few examples of what you can ask or how you can ask it, as long as it's a safe time to ask. Obviously it comes with caveats the person they're with, the environment that you're in, any language barriers. But if you can get a few ideas of the questions that you want to ask, so do you feel safe at home? It's quite a direct question. Or you might feel more comfortable, or your job role or the setting that you work in might mean that you can use more of an indirect question. Domestic abuse is really common, and I'm asking all my clients about it. How are things at home? Is there anything that we can help with? What's happening? Are you able to come to appointments when you want to come to appointments? Or does your partner sometimes get jealous if you talk to other people? There are lots of different ways to broach it and lots of different questions to use. And a lot of it comes down to how you want to ask it and how you feel more comfortable, or sometimes what happens in that appointment. You might just get an opportunity where there's an opening in a conversation, and you can read that opening and you can go in with the question that you feel is more appropriate for that conversation. So the next one is responding. So responding, once you've asked the question and you've had a disclosure, if you go to the next one, that's it, perfect. It's really, really crucial now. So asking the question is important, wording that in the right way and doing that in a safe way is important, but the way you respond to any disclosure is just as important, if not more. A lot of our clients, a lot of your patients may not have ever shared this information. You might be the first person that they make this disclosure to, and they might test to see how you respond before they give you a full disclosure or before they trust you with the information that they're giving you. So the spoken language is obviously really important, and we need to validate the disclosures made to us. We need to validate their experiences. Phrases like, I believe you, or this is not your fault, are really, really powerful at this point, because these clients, these patients, the people that we're working with might only just be at the stage of understanding that they're in an abusive relationship. They might not be ready to do anything. They might not be ready to actually access any support, but just vocalizing it and saying it out loud is really, really key. And to have somebody else saying back to them, I believe you, and it's not your fault, means that they're more likely to give you more information. They need to feel that they're taken seriously. At the same time as spoken language is really important, body language is equally. So the way we react to disclosure is not just limited to the words we use. People living with domestic abuse are really skilled at reading signs that we give or that anybody give without actually speaking. And if someone feels that they're not being taken seriously, or that we as professionals are too busy or too preoccupied or too shocked or too concerned about what they're telling us, then they'll just close down. So we need to use the right body language and the right spoken language to encourage them to feel safe to carry on making those disclosures. We also need to, at this point, establish what, if any, support they already have. So do they have friends and family? Have they started to tell these people around them, or are we the first person? Has anybody else noticed any of the abuse that's going on? And what do they want? So, as I've just said, even though they might say at this point they're telling you what's happening, they might not be ready to do anything about it. It might just be that they're ready to start to accept what's going on and to identify it and put a label to it, but not quite ready to do anything. So we need to find out what they want to do, not just assume that they want to do something about it. Alongside that, we also need to be honest and clear about confidentiality and information sharing procedures and the safeguarding policies within our organisations. So even if people don't necessarily want to take any action themselves, we've got to make them aware that we might have to share that information. If we're open and honest about it, then our clients understand the confidentiality issues, and it's their choice then, and they can decide what disclosures to make. So the next R is risk assess. There are loads of different risk assessments that go on during domestic abuse, and part of our main role as an IDVA is to regularly risk assess our clients using the DASH, which hopefully quite a lot of you are aware of. We risk assess regularly because obviously risk level is fluid, and some people might change risk level on a weekly basis. At this point, we need to assess immediate risk. So we need to find out if the abuse is getting worse now, immediately. Are they safe to go home after making this disclosure to us? Do they need us to contact 999 on their behalf? Or do they want to contact 999? Do they just need a safe space to do that? What do we need to keep that person immediately safe? It might be that actually on risk assessing at this point, they are safe to go back into that property. They're safe to go back into that relationship with an ongoing appointment the next time with you, or with a referral onto somewhere else. But we need to assess that at that disclosure point to make sure that we haven't increased the risk to them. Again, at this point, we also need to look at any safeguarding referrals that need to be made immediately following that disclosure. The next part of it is referring, and this is where Leanne spoke about the ways of referring into voice. Being able to recognise the abuse, asking the question and responding in the best way is the best foundation that we can have, because then you're able to refer into the most appropriate service. So if we can get those first steps right, the support package and the safety planning that's then offered to that client is the most appropriate for them. So being aware of the relevant services, of how to refer, for example, the information that Leanne's just shown on how to access voice online. If they don't want to be referred for any support, if they don't want you to complete a dash with them and access support that voice or that the Sunflower Centre can offer, then simply knowing what is out there can help. By telling somebody who's just disclosed to you that they're not alone and there are lots of support services out there, means that they can maybe go away and think about it. And then the next time they come back, they might want to access support. So just spending a bit of time making sure that you know what services are around, having leaflets, getting websites so that you know where they are, will really help you so that you can make sure that you do offer that support if it's needed. We also need to ensure that any of the relevant referrals are made at this point. And also, it's really important to make sure that you have obtained a safe way of contacting the client or patient moving forward. So if they've agreed for a referral for ongoing support, or if they've agreed that actually they don't want to do anything at this point, but they'll come back and see you next time, they've got next week when they've got an appointment with you, and they'll have a think about it. We need to make sure that we know the safest way to contact them. So, for example, does the person that's abusing them check their mobile? Do they have a safe email address that we can email them on? Do they go to work? Is work a safe place for us to contact them? Is there a safe time in the day? Is there a better phone number to contact them on? Do they have a family member that can act as a go-between with taking messages? If we get that at this point, then it makes it easier in the future to maintain that safety. Because if you get this information, we've asked the question, you've responded in the best way, you've got additional information, the person that you're talking to has agreed to some sort of ongoing support, brilliant, you've referred it on. If it comes through to us and we've got no safe way of contacting that person or following that referral up, then that patient or that client might be sat waiting, wondering what's going to happen. So it's really important at that point to take that information just for future, for the rest of us and for the professionals that might be involved. And then record. So equally as important as all the other R's that we've gone through, it needs to be recorded in a safe and confidential place for future reference. Even bits of information that you think maybe aren't relevant or aren't important, it all needs to be recorded, and it needs to be recorded as it's disclosed by the client or the patient. So don't interpret it or change the wording or write it or change it into a way that you think maybe sounds better or reads better. It needs to be recorded exactly as it's been disclosed. If there are any injuries or any marks or anything that needs to be recorded, we could draw a body map out and identify them on there. Document any of the concerns that you might have in addition to any of the disclosures made. but just make sure that we've got all of that information, because it might be really useful or pertinent for the future for ongoing safety planning or risk management. Any extra information that you can gather and record at this point is really important. Also, recording any actions that you take. So as Leanne's mentioned, referrals come through to the Sunflower Centre and then potentially go on to the MARAC, to the risk assessment. If actions have already been taken, then it saves time being wasted at that point. Or if actions have already been taken and there's other professionals involved, then it means that circle of support for that client, for that patient, is much wider. And the more that we know once that referrals come through, then the better equipped we are to make sure that we can support that client in the best way. So recording everything is just as important as the rest of it all, really. Okay, and that's a whiz through that. As IDVAs at the Sunflower Centre, our job is to work with high risk and very high risk victims of domestic abuse, but we can't do it as one agency. We need to have everybody else working with us to enable us to offer that support and that safety planning, really. So domestic abuse is huge. It's such a massive subject, and we all need to really work together effectively so that we can all tackle the effects and hopefully keep our clients and our patients as safe as possible, and make sure that we can offer them the best form of support. So these are all the contact details. We would encourage all of you to visit the NSAB website. There's lots of other resources, lots of important information on there. You can also follow them on Twitter. And also, I think in the chat, there is an evaluation form that we've been asked to ask you to complete on our behalf, please. That would be brilliant. And I think I've finished, Leanne.
Thank you, Lucy.
That was very quick and fast. Has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask?
I'll just check the chat in case anybody's written any questions in there. No. Well, thank you for your time today. Thank you for coming along. If you're sitting there wondering who do I refer to then, the Sunflower Centre or Voice, we would encourage you to please use the dynamic dash form, which is an electronic dash form on the Voice website, and then we can use that risk assessment to best assess which service is most appropriate for the particular person that you're referring in. We will pop the last slide back up. Someone's just asked us to. Bear with me 1 second. Hopefully you can see that now. If you do have any queries, please do get in touch with the NSAB office, and I'm sure that they'll pass any questions, if you think of any outside of this presentation, on to Lucy and I to answer. Like I said, thank you very much for your time. Please do ensure that you complete those evaluation forms, because it will help, I'm sure, shape what these training sessions may look like in future months and years to come as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks.